The girl at the far end of Calder's Landing Farmers Market had a talent most performers would trade their strings for, though it was not one she ever wanted. She could disappear standing up. She was 17 years old, in canvas shoes gone gray at the toes, and on the third Saturday of April she set up a wire music stand between a tomato plant table and a honey cellar, and became, as far as the crowd was concerned, part of the fixtures. People flowed past her the way the river behind the market flowed past its pilings. Nobody stopped. She didn't blame them. The fiddle under her chin was the kind of instrument folks look away from politely, the way you look away from a scar. Burn shadows bloomed across its lower half like weather stains on a barn door. The edge of one sound hole was rimmed in char. The varnish had crackled into the map of a country nobody ever visits. And when the morning sun came off the water and warmed the wood, the instrument gave up a faint smell of smoke. 49 years old, that smell, and still in there. Some things don't air out. Her name was Maeve Donnelly. She opened with Soldier's Joy, because it was fast and fast, bright tunes make people reach into their pockets without breaking stride. She followed it with Wayfaring Stranger, because the honeyman 2 tables down had asked for it once in March and now considered it a standing order. And then, at 10:20 in the morning, because a man with a lanyard and a clipboard had just informed her that this spot was assigned to a kettle corn vendor and she would need to pack it up, she decided to play one more. It was a slow air with no name. Her grandfather had whistled it at the kitchen sink for as long as she could remember and never said what it was called. After he died, she had spent 11 evenings pulling it back out of her own memory one phrase at a time, the way you work a splinter loose, slowly, so nothing breaks off and stays. She closed her eyes, she set the bow on the strings. She let the tune go out over the seedling flats and the coffee steam and the last of the river fog. And 30 feet away, a big-shouldered old man carrying a cardboard tray of tomato stopped walking. He did not stop the way people stop for music. He stopped the way people stop for ghosts. He was 79 years old, and he was not looking at the girl at all. He was looking at the fiddle. He had built it with his own hands in 1974 in a workshop that no longer existed, and for 49 years he had believed, the way you believe a thing you stood in the road and watched, that it was ash. Now, before I tell you how a burned fiddle came to rest under the chin of a cleaning lady's granddaughter, let me say one thing. If you have ever loved something the world had written off, this story was told for you. Stay to the end of it. And if an old man's stories about patient hands are worth a minute of your day, subscribing is how you tell me so. That's the whole speech. Back to the girl. Maeve Donnelly was raised mostly by her grandparents in a narrow rented house in North Knoxville with a porch that sloped toward the street as if it were leaning in to hear the neighbors better. Her mother had gone to Nashville the year Maeve turned 6, chasing work that kept almost becoming steady, and an arrangement meant to last one summer had quietly lasted a childhood. Nobody in the house called it what it was. They called it Tuesdays on the phone. Her grandfather, Declan Donnelly, came over from County Clare in 1968 with a machinist's certificate and a cardboard suitcase, and spent 34 years turning metal before his hands asked him to stop. He was not a musician, he was something rarer, a listener. He could not play a note, but he could tell within 2 bars whether the player meant it, and his highest compliment, issued perhaps 4 times in his life, was a slow nod and the single word, well. For Maeve's 11th birthday, he took her to Cumberland Coin and Pawn out on the highway, a place that smelled of gun oil and old carpet, where a fiddle hung on the back wall between a weed trimmer and a framed print of a lighthouse. It was scorched. Anyone could see it was scorched. The pawnbroker wanted $60 and called it a fixer-upper. Declan walked him down to $38.50 and called it nothing at all until they were both in the truck. Then he set it on his granddaughter's lap. "It's burned," Maeve said. "It's seasoned," Declan said, and turned the key. Where it came from, the pawnbroker couldn't say. A storage unit auction, an estate lot, a chain of hands older than his paperwork. It had a dried-out seam that buzzed on the low string in damp weather, a bridge worn down like an old doorstep, and a voice. That was the thing nobody expected, and the reason Declan had walked into that shop 3 Saturdays running before her birthday. Under the scarring, the fiddle spoke low and dark and immediate, like a person who has been through something and no longer wastes words. She learned to play it the way old-time fiddlers have always learned, which is to say in public by ear, from people 2 and 3 times her age. Second Fridays, there was a jam at the Beardsley Hollow Community Center, folding chairs in a circle under buzzing fluorescent light, and here is something worth knowing about that music if you have never sat inside it. The tune lives in the bow arm, not the fingers. Old-time fiddling was dance music before it was listening music, and a dancer's feet follow the bow, the steady saw of it, the shuffle patterns rocking the rhythm forward, the open strings droning under the melody like a floor under a room. Nobody in that circle read notation. You learned a tune by watching somebody's elbow until your own arm believed it. It took Maeve 6 years of Second Fridays to get good, the only way anybody ever has, slowly, in front of witnesses, corrected by people who fixed her mistakes by playing the phrase again a little louder. And underneath all of it, at the kitchen sink, her grandfather whistled the air with no name. He claimed he had carried it over from Claire in 1968. Her grandmother Bridget maintained that Declan Donnelly couldn't carry a bucket, never mind a tune. More likely, she said, he had caught it off a radio in 1970 and spent 50 years improving it in his own memory, which was the most Irish thing a man could possibly do. He whistled it washing dishes. He whistled it checking the mail. Maeve grew up assuming the tune was simply part of the house, like the slope of the porch. 23 months before that April morning, he died in his chair by the front window, quietly, between 1 hour and the next. The whistling stopped, and the house got loud the way empty houses are loud. Maeve did not cry at the funeral. She went home, took the fiddle out of its case with the faded orange lining, and spent 11 evenings finding the air one phrase at a time. When she had all of it, she played it through once, alone in the kitchen with the tap dripping, and then she cried. Now you might think a fiddle is a fiddle. Elias Thornburg would forgive you for that, but he would not agree with you. In 1974, Elias was 27 years old, a second-generation woodworker with his Swedish grandfather's handplanes and a one-room shop on Gallow Fork Road. And that spring, he built the 14th instrument of his life from a red spruce blown down on a mountain slope 2 counties east. Makers will tell you the top plate of a fiddle is its voice, and the voice is carved, not assembled. You work the spruce down 1/10 by 1/10 of a millimeter, flexing it between your thumbs, tapping it beside your ear, listening for the ring to open. Leave it thick and the instrument stays a box. Go past the mark by a pencil line's width, and the voice turns hollow and never comes back. There is no gauge for the last of it. Only the wood telling you, and the maker deciding whether to believe it. When number 14 was varnished and strung, Elias pasted a paper label inside the body where it could be read through the sound hole, the way makers have done for 300 years. His grandfather had told him why you signed them, because someday, the old man said, it will be somewhere you are not. By the spring of 2026, the economics of Maeve Donnelly's music fit on the back of the cardboard. Thank you sign in her case. Her grandmother cleaned medical offices on the 5:10 a.m. shift and came home smelling of ammonia and other people's coffee. A shop downtown had priced the fiddle's repairs at $585. The open seam glued and clamped, a new bridge cut, and a good Saturday at Calder's Landing brought in 20, maybe 30. So she played around the damage, leaning her tunes away from the low string in wet weather the way you favor a bad ankle, and she kept a running ledger in her head and told Bridget none of the numbers. The market's operations coordinator was a trim, sunburned man named Randy Kessler, who wore his lanyard the way some men wear a badge. And I want to be fair to him because the world is full of Randy Kesslers, and very few of them are villains. He had a vendor map, a waiting list, a seasonal busker permit that cost $35, and opinions about presentation. We try to keep a certain look down here, he told her in March. his eyes on the char. He never did learn her name that spring. He found a name for the instrument instead. The pawn-shop fiddle, he called it, to the honeyman, to the kettlecorn family, once within 10 feet of her. Somebody's let that girl haul a pawn-shop fiddle in front of paying vendors. He didn't say it cruelly. He said it the way people say things they have never actually looked at. Here is what Randy Kessler could not have known. In March of 1977, on a night with wind in it, a wiring fault inside the wall of the shop on Gallo Fork Road did in roughly 40 minutes what wiring faults do. Elias Thornburg stood in the road in his nightclothes and watched 21 instruments worth of his life go up. Every fiddle he had built that hadn't yet sold, his grandfather's patterns, his molds, his seasoned wood. The firefighters saved the block foundation and one chestnut wardrobe he had used for drying varnish, its outside charred to alligator hide. He never opened it. His wife, Ingrid, asked him not to sift the wreckage. No good, she said, ever came of a man counting his losses by hand, and he honored that for the rest of his life. A salvage contractor cleared the site that June, and whatever the wardrobe held went wherever total losses go, an auction lot, a storage unit, 50 years of strangers' hands. Elias never built another instrument. He made cabinets for 40 years and was good at it, and if you asked whether he missed the other work, he would offer you coffee and change the subject. Ingrid kept one photograph of the shop on the hallway wall until she passed in 2021. After that, he kept it there for her. The Swedish hand planes stayed oiled and wrapped in flannel in a garage he did not work in. Some men keep a fire burning. Elias kept one out. On the third Saturday of April, 2026, he came to Calder's Landing for tomato starts, because Ingrid had always planted on the third Saturday, and he had kept the appointment 4 years running, the way a man visits a grave. He was standing in the aisle with the cardboard tray in both hands when a slow air he had never heard in his life came across the market on the voice of a fiddle he knew better than his own. Because here is the thing about that voice, and it is worth a minute, since it is the hinge this whole story turns on. Fire, short of burning, is not only ruin to spruce. Heat drives the resin and the moisture out of the wood and changes its very temper, leaving it lighter and stiffer and quicker to speak. Makers today pay a premium for tops baked slowly in kilns for exactly this reason. The treatment stands in for a century of natural aging, and players describe the result the same way every time. It sounds old. The night the shop burned, the chestnut wardrobe cooked number 14 like a kiln. It came out scarred on the outside and 50 years older on the inside. Its voice gone low and dark and immediate. The voice a retired machinist heard from the back wall of a pawn shop and could not walk away from 3 Saturdays in a row. Elias heard the voice. He also heard, inside 16 bars, everything that was wrong with it. The seam buzzing under the low string, the bridge slumped past its working height, the sound post drifted south of where his own hands had stood it up. He heard it the way a doctor hears a whole history in a single cough. The tomato starts sat forgotten in his hands. The market moved around him. He stood so still, so long, that a woman at the honey table touched his sleeve and asked if he needed to sit down. He crossed the 30 feet. Maeve was already lowering the fiddle half-packed, and when a shadow fell across her open case, she assumed the coordinator had come back to hurry her. She looked up instead into a wide, weathered face she had never seen, and the face said quietly, "May I see it? Not may I play it, see it." She would remember that. She handed it over, and the big, flat-knuckled hands received it the way you take a sleeping child, and turned it to the light, and he looked in through the sound hole on the low-string side, and Calder's Landing went somewhere else for a moment. Inside the body, on paper gone the color of weak tea, in handwriting he knew because it was his own, E. Thornburg, Knoxville, Tennessee, number 14, 1974. "Where did you get this fiddle?" His voice came out level. His hands did not. "My granddad bought it for my 11th birthday." "A beat, he's passed. This fiddle burned, no sir." She took it back gently, but all the way back. "It's just ugly." Something crossed the old man's face that was nearly a laugh and nearly the other thing, and settled someplace between. He told her in half a dozen sentences, The shop, the wind, the wardrobe he never opened. By the second sentence, the honeyman had drifted over, then the kettle-corn family, and somewhere behind them, Randy Kessler had gone quiet in a way no vendor had previously witnessed. I put my name inside 14 of these by 1974, Elias said. 21. Before the fire, this is the only one that ever came back to me. Maeve looked down at the scarred wood for a long moment. It didn't come back, she said. It was waiting on you to walk by. There was a pause then of the kind a whole crowd somehow agrees to. River fog burned off, sun full on the wet tables, the faint smell of warm smoke rising off the fiddle between them. Then Elias Thornburg asked, in the voice of a man asking a favor, whether she would play the air once more from the top. And Maeve Donnelly stood in her assigned spot, well past her assigned time, and played it. And a man who had kept a fire out for 49 years stood with tomato plants at his feet and let this one be lit. Nobody applauded when it ended. Somebody exhaled audibly. That was better. Kessler appeared at her elbow before noon with a folded receipt. One seasonal busker permit, $35, paid in full. He did not hand it over with a speech. I've been calling that thing the pawn shop fiddle since March, he said, to no one in particular, in the flat voice of a man itemizing his sins, and he walked off before anyone could make it into a moment. The repairs happened in a garage in Fountain City, at a bench Elias built in a single weekend after 4 years of building nothing. He would not take the $585 or any other dollars. He took tunes, and he took help, which turned out to be the real price. 6 Saturdays running, Maeve stood at his elbow while the hide glue pot warmed. A smell between a wet dog and breakfast, and don't let anybody romanticize it, and learned what her fiddle actually was. They closed the seam with hot glue on a palette knife and a row of spool clamps and left it to hold overnight. He showed her how a bridge blank is cut to its one instrument. The feet trimmed with a knife until they sit on the curved top with no daylight under them. Because the bridge is the doorway every vibration walks through, and a doorway has to touch its floor. He stood the sound post with a bent steel setter through the sound hole, moved it the width of a business card, had her play, moved it again, had her play until the low string opened like a window in spring. By the 4th Saturday, she was making small cuts herself with his hands hovering an inch off hers, the way a man spots a ladder. By the 6th, she could tune the fiddle to itself and tell him why it worked. Before he strung it back up, he pasted a second label beneath the first, repaired by the maker, 2026. Go down to Calder's Landing on a Saturday in October, and you will find her with the river at her back, the permit laminated and clipped to the case lid, the honeyman still placing his standing order. The scars are all still there. She asked Elias to leave every one of them visible, and he said he wouldn't have known how to do otherwise. The fiddle sounds the way it always sounded, only more of it now, the low string free at last, and when the sun warms the wood you can still catch that faint breath of smoke, though it no longer smells like what was lost. It smells like what got through. Elias Thornburg works evenings at the bench in Fountain City. There is one commission on his winter list, the first since 1977, promised to nobody in a hurry. Its label will read number 22. He says the new one will have to earn its scars, and he says it dry, the way he says everything, but he says it. And the air finally has a name. Maeve wrote it out in pencil on staff paper Elias gave her, the first notation the tune has ever worn in its life, and titled it Declan's Air. The first time she announced that out loud at the market, her grandmother Bridget was standing in the crowd on a rare Saturday off, still in her work shoes, nodding slowly. Anybody who has buried someone knows what that nod cost her. It looked for all the world like a man at a kitchen sink saying, "Well, I have spent my working life around instruments that outlived their maker's plans, and I'll tell you what this one taught me. People are quick to put a price on a thing and slow to actually listen to it. A fiddle wears its worst day on the outside and keeps its maker's name on the inside, and I have known more than a few human beings built exactly the same way. So if there is something scarred sitting quiet in your house or in your family, don't be too sure it's done singing. Sometimes the only thing broken is who's listening. This story is true-to-life fiction. All characters, names, places, and businesses are creative inventions, and any resemblance to real persons or events is coincidental.